Now we assemble our Power Core panel, journalists covering the White House. Joining me now from Washington is David Smith, Washington Bureau Chief for The Guardian, and Christine Emba, an opinion writer at The Washington Post. Good evening to both of you, and thanks for joining us on CTV News Channel.
Thanks for having me.
Christine, let's make a start with President Trump's visit to Japan. We now know that trade is taking center stage, and according to the president's tweet, agriculture and beef have been discussed. But what about automobiles? That's the sticking point as well.
Absolutely. So President Trump has threatened a 25% tariff on foreign car imports, which would obviously be a huge blow to Japan. That said, the Japanese Prime Minister and Japan's trade delegations in general have made this event very special for Trump. They're using kind of as much flattery and hand-holding as possible over these 4 days. Trump has played golf. He's presented the presidential cup at a sumo wrestling match. And as a result, President Trump has said that he's willing to be a bit friendlier on the bilateral trade negotiations.
That's right. David, so what's your thought on the sports on this particular 4-day visit? We have golf, sumo, and the other fanfare that's taking place. What do you think is going to be the highlight of this 4-day state visit?
I think possibly the sumo wrestling has to sort of grab the headlines and produce the most spectacular photos, just that shot of Donald Trump with a sumo wrestler. And some will remember that in America, of course, Trump used to be involved with professional wrestling and even body slammed somebody at some point. So as we've seen with Saudi Arabia and France and one or two other countries, Japan really puts on a spectacle. It's this theory of how do you work with Trump in terms of flattering him, giving lots of pomp and pageantry, tweeting photos, playing golf with him. Shinzo Abe of Japan has really led the way in that in many respects, and even met Trump before he was sworn in as president. I think domestically, though, within Japan, people are going to say, is it all worth it? When do we get to see the rewards? And clearly trade is a central question on that, with steel and aluminium tariffs still in place, and now these potential impending car tariffs. Some suggestions that America is just going to wait until the next Japanese elections in a couple of months to decide further on that. But for now, it's unclear whether all this flattery actually pays off.
That's right. What also intrigues me is, and Christine, this one's for you, the kind of camaraderie we're looking at Shinzo Abe and between President Trump. They've already met twice in the last 2 months. There may be a third visit in the end of June, I think, with G20 in Japan once again. This constant engaging with Japan, Christine, where do you think it's really headed?
Right. As my co-panelist said, Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and the rest of his team have been, I think one could say, perhaps the friendliest diplomatic counterparts to the U.S. Yes, even before President Trump was installed, they're in constant phone conversation. The trips are multiple. But there's a lot of reason behind this diplomacy. There is North Korea, which is in Japan's very near radius. And Japan does depend on, American force to keep that threat at bay. Keep your enemies close, but keep your friends closer. If Donald Trump and being friendly to Donald Trump will keep Japan safe, they will do whatever it takes.
Speaking on that front, David, while the president has been talking tough where trade is concerned, we saw yet another tweet by the president where he sort of downplayed these latest missile tests by Korea while he is in Japan. So how do you think that's going to really impact the relationship, and why downplaying what his own advisor is saying, David?
Indeed, it's another extraordinary one that, yet again, I think if any other American president in any situation did that, it would be a story for weeks. And there's a danger we've become numb to Donald Trump and we just shrug it off. But with this tweet, really downplaying the North Korean missile tests so far, saying, others are concerned, but he trusts Chairman Kim and everything will be okay in the end. As you say, that does appear to contradict his own national security advisor, John Bolton. And there's reports that Trump thinks Bolton is being too aggressive and too hawkish, not only on North Korea, but also Iran. It also seems to fly in the face of Japan's position as well. And I can only think perhaps it's some kind of strategy where Trump really does believe personal relationships are uppermost, and it's his way of putting pressure on Kim not to break whatever trust they've established. Also, by now, I think Japan and other countries are quite accustomed to Trump's Twitter feed being quite freewheeling and wayward, and not necessarily representing U.S. foreign policy and certainly what the State Department is doing.
Okay, so let's now shift our focus to what's happening within the country. Of course, internationally, U.S. is dealing a lot with when it comes to Korea or perhaps Iran, but within the country as well. Christine, this one's for you. The acrimony between Speaker Pelosi and the president is speaking. It's getting personal too. Do you see this getting any better or tanking further with the elections next year?
It was always tense, but yes, tensions are ratcheting up. I mean, this week, President Trump stormed out of a meeting on infrastructure, which was seemingly one of the only ideas that both parties could agree on. Nancy Pelosi has become and has always been a very shrewd negotiator and an expert troll, great at pressing President Trump's buttons. And this week she did so by implying that he was engaging in a cover-up because of his resistance to subpoenas from a number of congressional committees over Trump-related matters, whether finances or things related to the Mueller report. It does seem, however, that yes, with the 2020 elections now in view, they're not close, 18 months away still. The president and his allies seem very interested in, pushing the Democratic caucus and party to splinter further, whether by goading Pelosi to support an impeachment, with many members of the Democratic Party would like, but which America does not support by a majority yet, or otherwise. These tensions are not good for either side.
That's correct. David, a cue from what Christina just said, highlighting all those points, the Mueller report, or perhaps the investigation into the financial records, all of that. Where do you think the week ahead is going?
I suspect we'll see more debate. I mean, after a little break for Memorial Day on Monday. But this impeachment issue does not appear to be going away, as there's a growing list of Democrats pushing for it, and Nancy Pelosi caught in the middle, trying to be diplomatic, trying to look ahead to the political consequences. So far, it seems Senate Democrats are actually on her side, and they do want to keep that talk down. But you have a runaway train here in that, as she's put it, Donald Trump keeps self-impeaching and keeps doing things and refusing subpoenas that just add to that pressure. So I think this will be an ongoing issue, possibly up until the presidential election.
Okay, we'll have to leave it at that for the moment. David Smith and Christine Emba, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and have a great long weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.